Well, the knives are out for Elon Musk in Washington, all because last year he rejected a request from Ukraine to not flip on his Starlink internet access so they could use it to attack the Russian naval fleet in Crimea. This was seen as like, oh my God, you're not supporting Ukraine and helping them attack the Russian naval fleet. Dan Cohen is in Washington with all of the blowback against Elon Musk. Dan, what do we know?
Yeah, Clayton. So what happened was last September, a year ago, the Ukrainians wanted to carry out an attack against a Russian naval fleet stationed in Sevastopol in Crimea using drone submarines guided by Starlink. They thought, apparently, that Starlink, which Elon Musk and SpaceX, which he owns, provides in Ukraine, that it actually covers Crimea, but they were wrong. It does not operate in Crimea because of U.S. sanctions on Russia. Russia controls Crimea. It is now part of Russia after the referendum a couple of years ago. So in this way, the U.S. recognizes that the results of that referendum. So Ukraine wanted to use Starlink for what would have been a very dangerous and escalatory attack in this war that is not defensive. It's in Russian-controlled territory, not in Ukrainian territory. So not defensive, but offensive. And that would have required Elon Musk to violate U.S. law. So that's the correct version of what happened. The journalist Walter Isaacson, in his new biography of Musk, he actually wrote that Musk switched off Starlink in Crimea in order to prevent this attack. That was wrong, but Isaacson actually clarified it on Twitter. Here we can see the clarification, but the clarification has been completely ignored by the most sycophantic war pigs in politics, and in the media. Everyone from John Bolton to Elizabeth Warren has denounced Elon Musk.
I wouldn't. I mean, it is his decision to cut off the Starlink capability in the face of a potential Ukrainian military operation was a direct interference in the.
It is not up to one billionaire to go off in secret and change our foreign policy. I think we need an investigation, both from the Department of Defense and from Congress.
Here we have the reporter on MSNBC's Morning Joe floating the idea that Musk should be sanctioned for not going along with this attack.
Yeah, and we saw Tony Blinken being grilled about that this weekend. You know, was Elon Musk trying to undermine effectively U.S. policy in Ukraine, and should there be some kind of sanctions against him? And
then this one is my favorite. We have Rachel Maddow just totally out of her mind.
There's this one American private citizen who is intervening to try to stop Ukraine from winning the war, to try to stop Ukraine from defending itself against this Russian invasion, trying to stop it and, in fact, stopping it by turning their communication lines on and off at will as he sees fit, or as someone sees fit.
Rachel Maddow is like, I mean, unhinged. I mean, I love that graphic behind her with this, like, Hitman logo of the Russian flag. It's this deteriorating paint job calling for Musk to have turned this on so that Ukraine could have launched this. And I think the sanction piece of all of this is really fascinating, right? Because basically Elon Musk is going along with U.S. sanctions and not violating U.S. sanctions. And what they're asking him to do is to sanction Elon Musk for adhering to U.S. sanctions against Russia.
Yeah, I mean, what Rachel Maddow says there is just, she's implying, she says, as someone sees fit. She's referring to Putin. She's implying that Elon Musk actually took orders from Putin to prevent this attack. And then the graphic, as you said, calling Musk a Russian hitman. She's calling him a traitor, but she just won't explicitly say it. She just implies it. And we know what the punishment for treason is in the United States. It can be death. So that's a pretty incredible lie and claim from Rachel Maddow. And again, this is all based on a lie. She says that Elon Musk turned off Starlink when the Ukrainians were going to carry out this attack, which he did not do. He did not turn it off. He just rejected the request to turn it on, which was in line with U.S. sanctions, and was also a wise move to prevent, maybe a major escalation of this horrible war. So who knows what it could have turned into? Maybe even a nuclear exchange. I mean, another thing in my mind, Clayton, that the reaction from Washington, from the pundits and the politicians makes clear is that this is a U.S. war with Ukrainians providing manpower. Because if this were between Ukraine and Musk, then they wouldn't have much to say about it. That would be like, okay, that's between them. We're just providing the weapons. They make the decisions. That's what they say, right?
Right.
But, that's not what's going on. They had a complete meltdown that Musk is not doing exactly what he is contradicting U.S. foreign policy. So, it just really rips the mask off this whole thing.
Yeah, it was always so fishy too. I mean, he was donating all of these Starlink pieces of equipment back at the start of this war, and so they have hundreds of these Starlink mobile satellites that they've been using in the field to attack Russia. So it's not like they haven't been using them all along. And one could argue, right, that maybe you should shut them all off in that entire region. Well, I mean, what would that do if we shut all of these Starlink satellites off all through Ukraine and that entire area?
Exactly. I mean, to me, that's like really the fundamental question that this whole thing raises. It's like none of these, officials or media talking heads had anything negative to say throughout this whole time about Elon Musk providing Starlink satellite internet in Ukraine. It's been there all along. And in fact, it was USAID that bought tens of thousands of Musk's Starlink satellites early on in the war. This article actually lists the cost at roughly $10 million, and it's essential for Ukraine's war effort. Mikhailo Fedorov, the deputy prime minister, former World Economic, young leader or young fellow, he told the New York Times recently that, quote, Starlink is indeed the blood of our entire communication infrastructure now. This is one of the fundamental components of our success. And earlier this year at the World Economic Forum, where he appeared, he said, this is our new critical infrastructure in liberated territories and frontline areas to restore communications between people. So, I mean, Starlink and Elon Musk is essential. It's fundamental in Ukraine's war effort. And really, I mean, I don't want to, obviously I'm not on the side of Rachel Maddow and all, but how is Musk not war profiteering like Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or any of the military-industrial complex behemoths who are making huge amounts of money in Ukraine? He is too. So, but I mean, to your point, if he had never sent Ukraine Starlink or cut them off, I think the war would have probably I'll say maybe ended long ago, based on Mikhailo Fedorov's comments, and maybe hundreds of thousands of people wouldn't have died. But he didn't. He didn't do that. So, in fact, just this June, a couple of months ago, SpaceX got a Pentagon contract to keep Starlink going. So, I mean, Elon Musk is essential. SpaceX and Starlink is essential to keeping the Ukraine war going, despite this kind of, fight between them now, which is based on a lie.
It is interesting, really. I mean, and I think, there's a lot of people maybe on the right who now, love Elon Musk for what he's done with Twitter and, pushing free speech, and they kind of look the other way on questions like this. But I think it's incumbent upon us to ask these questions. Why are we supplying Starlink satellite equipment to people who are carrying out attacks on civilian marketplaces? I mean, the New York Times investigation over the past 48 hours proved that attack in the Donbass, that, of course, the Western media and Zelensky immediately jumped on and said it was Russia. It was Russia. The New York Times now has confirmed that it was, in fact, Ukraine carrying out these attacks, and they continue to attack in these areas. And if Starlink is literally the linchpin that's allowing them to carry out these attacks, to make these communications targets and communicate back and forth to Kiev and so forth, I mean, shutting them off. What would shutting off all these Starlink satellites in that area do? It would be perhaps transformative, and it could, in fact, save tens of thousands of lives and end this war right now.
Exactly. I mean, another very important element to this whole Starlink thing is not only the war effort, but the digital transformation, which we've covered extensively here on Redacted. You can watch my long report on DIA, the digital ID app, and DIA is completely reliant on not only U.S. funding, but on Starlink. This digital ID app cannot operate throughout Ukraine without Starlink. So also Ukraine's CBDC, its central bank digital currency, which goes hand in hand with that DIA digital ID. Neither of those would be possible without Starlink. And both DIA and Starlink are or were, in the case of Starlink, was funded by USAID. DIA still is to this day. So it's a really kind of where there's this kind of small contradiction between these two. It kind of, to me, seems like Elon Musk has this anti-establishment persona in a way, but he's very much with the establishment in like 99%. So like, if I think a good analogy that is like the opposable thumb of this whole machine. Like it's your hand is much more effective with a thumb, and it seems like it's in opposition, but it actually works much better. It allows the entire hand to function and operate in a much more sophisticated way. So it kind of seems to me like that's really what Elon Musk's role is, despite fundamentally, despite this kind of calls for his head from Rachel Maddow.
Interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, it's unbelievable to think about how integral Starlink is to this entire war, and why people aren't, and let's lead the charge and maybe calling for them to end the use of Starlink in these war zones for this very purpose. Of course, we've all outlined how nefarious the DIA program is, and of course how nefarious CBDCs are, and the central bank digital currencies. Of course, you have Representative Tom Emmer of Minnesota now calling for to ban the use of CBDCs and not to allow that. So meanwhile, the United States Congress and the Pentagon funding Starlink and allowing us to use Starlink in a war zone, but at the same time also being able to fund CBDCs in Ukraine. It's a big bowl of hypocrisy, I guess, is the way I look at it. Exactly. Dan Cohen in Washington, thanks so much. He's not using Starlink right now to communicate on the show.
I'm not using Starlink today, but I did. I was using Starlink like 2 weeks ago in Haiti for a couple minutes. So it's all over the place. And there's a gigantic
Michael Yan, journalist Michael Yan, who we've had on the show a number of times. He's reporting in Panama using Starlink Mobile out in the field, like in the middle of the dense jungle. So the application of it is, it's incredible. But when used for the wrong reasons, this is what we end up having here in Ukraine right now. So fascinating, interesting. Thank you so much, Dan, in Washington. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.